Hi, my name is Anessa, and I would like to talk a little bit about teaching pragmatic competence, specifically instructional consciousness raising as a way to develop pragmatic competence. When I did my research, I found that one key point that research has highlighted is that it's important to move beyond the view that one country or nation has one culture with one set of norms for interacting. Crash thinks that in the future the language teacher will be defined not only as the impresario of a certain linguistic performance, but as the catalyst for an ever-widening critical cultural competence. Oxar defined competence as the ability of a person to carry out and interpret verbal, paralinguistic, nonverbal, and extraverbal communicative actions in two roles, that of the speaker and that of the hearer, according to the sociocultural and psychological rules of the group. Now, what is pragmatic ability? Well, it's a loaded topic. It includes phonology, semantics, speech acts, sociolinguistics, cultural studies, and communications. I wanted to see how language is used in real social interactions and how we can teach pragmatic competence in the classroom, specifically through speech acts, the speech act of requests and apologies. I chose this because research suggests that this would be the way to bring this into the classroom. So we have language users, and then we have the context of the interaction. And those three have to be incorporated into the pedagogical intentions. Now, is pragmatics teachable? Is there a polite way, for example, to apologize across cultures? Lakoff defined politeness as a behavior developed in societies in order to reduce friction in personal interaction. What could be the shared elements of apologies across cultures, and what elements may lead to intercultural miscommunication or conflict? These are the questions that would have to be answered in the classroom. How does this affect the pragmatic competence of an L2 learner? Now, what is pragmatic failure? Well, it's the inability to understand what is meant by what is said. This funny picture on the right here looks at a guy who says, "Help!" and the old man is not reacting. But when the guy says, "Excuse me, sir, I'm terribly sorry to bother you, but I wonder if you would mind helping me a moment, as long as it's no trouble, of course." This is when the guy reaches out and actually responds to the speaker's utterance by acting. Speech acts. Some theory on speech acts. Austin presented the principles of speech act theory, positing that utterances do two things at once: communicate meaning and perform an action. Searle claimed that speech acts are part of one's linguistic competence and are rule-governed, meaningful, and done through illocutionary force. Brown and Levinson introduced indirect speech acts, conceptualizing politeness as a way to avoid conflict. Now, what research has found is that speech acts exhibit developmental patterns. So they are the first place where we look at the development of the learner's linguistic competence and communicative competence. Research suggests that we can teach speech acts via multimedia prompts, and that seems to be something that a lot of the articles that I looked at are discussing. Bringing video into the classroom. Why? Well, movies and shows and multimedia prompts simulate real-life interactions. They are interesting, they motivate student participation, they offer information about speakers' postures and gestures and other nonverbal cues. They help students recognize speech acts studied in class. In other words, they can be post-view material. And they help highlight conventional or formulaic expressions, as well as allow students to compare the material cross-linguistically with their L1. The study that I chose by Darakhshan and Islami is called The Effect of Consciousness-Raising Instruction on the Pragmatic Development of Apology and Request. The study performed by Darakhshan and Islami looked at the effectiveness of instructional consciousness raising through multimedia prompts on the development of the speech acts of request and apologies. Instructional materials can often be decontextualized and devoid of appropriate social and cultural elements, as I mentioned before. So what they did is they worked with 60 Persian intermediate adult learners of English, ages 17 through 26, and they were randomly divided up in 3 groups, with each group performing a different task: discussion, role play, and interactive translation. The participants viewed and discussed 18 extracts of apologies collected from different shows and films, and were given a written multiple-choice discourse completion test that included several apology scenarios. Learners were exposed to direct expressions of apology, acknowledgement of responsibility, explanation, offer of repair, and promise of non-recurrence. They were also exposed to material about requests, but I did not include that in this summary. They were made aware of contextual factors such as social status, distance, and imposition. The discussion groups had a less controlled environment as opposed to the groups doing role plays and interactive translation. They seemed to have enjoyed more negotiation in their interaction and had more opportunities to discuss socio-pragmatic and pragma-linguistic features of the language. Some examples from the study. The previewing example, which was the multiple-choice discourse completion task, said the following, had the students fill this out prior to viewing. You're in a bookstore, and while looking around, you come across a book that you have been looking for a long time. You're so excited that you rush out of the bookstore with the book without paying for it. When the shop assistant stops you, you realize that you forgot to pay for it, so you apologize. Which way do you do that? A. Oh, I'm sorry, I was too happy. I like this book and have been looking for it for a long time. B. I'm very sorry that I forgot to pay for the book because I was so excited. I've been looking for it for a long time. I hope you can forgive my behavior. C. Oh, I'm sorry. I was so excited about finding this book that I have been looking for ages that I just plain forgot to pay. I really am very sorry. How much do I owe you? What's happening here is the best answer is C. So now what is an apology? It's the linguistic steps we take to rectify social norms that may have been violated. Depending on how the wrongdoer perceives their actions, plus age, plus social distance, plus gender, these factors will affect the forms that the apologies take. In the bookstore example, it was a situation that required the speaker to do a whole lot more than the answers A and B were providing. In fact, B was a bit more formal and probably not the most appropriate and would have tagged the speaker as a non-native speaker. Now, the strategies and formula for an apology are explicit expression of an apology. I'm so sorry, I apologize. Taking on responsibility, it was my fault. Explanation, the bus was late. Offer of repair, I'll pay for it. And promise of non-recurrence, it won't happen again. It seems that in the example we just viewed, we looked at an explicit expression of an apology, the speaker took on responsibility, explained, and offered to repair. Now, what is a request? Well, to speak is to act. Every time a speaker provides an utterance, they are attempting to accomplish something with the words. Specifically, the speaker intends to have some effect on the listener and wants the listener to recognize their intention. There is a direct request, stop it, Annie. Conventionally direct request, Annie, would you like a ride? And non-conventionally indirect request, I have a car, meaning I could give you a ride. Now, my final thoughts. The level of directness varies cross-culturally and situationally, meaning that there are no right and wrong answers, only more or less appropriate answers depending on the context and how we are culturally informed. Now, as far as this study is concerned, because learners greatly benefit from rich and contextually appropriate input, this study proved that authentic and representative language in classroom instruction materials increases the learner's pragmatic ability of understanding but also performing speech acts in any given target language. So consciousness raising and awareness raising is very important. The researchers said that appropriate use of language is highly bound to cultural values, situations, interlocutors, etc. An awareness-raising approach using video-driven prompts can sensitize learners to various pragmatic patterns and cultural differences. The journals I consulted were International Journal of Intercultural Relations, Annual Review of Applied Linguistics, English Language Teaching Journal, and the Electronic Journal for English as a Second Language. Thank you.